Recording is in progress. That's a good sign. All right. This is High Vibe Tribe TV. This is episode 19. Today I have a special guest. His name is Harlan Emil. Is that how you say it?
Yep.
Gruber. Welcome to the show, Harlan.
All right. Good to be here.
Just a quick bio from your own website. It says you received a BFA in environmental design from Parsons Schools of Design after studying physics at Emory University and electrical engineering at Georgia Tech and the University of Miami. And that your interests have been combining all these interests in a lifelong art and design profession that has exhibited internationally. And let's see, you've worked on SITE projects of New York before launching your own career in 1987. And you have been attending the Burning Man Festival in Nevada since 1999. Every single year?
Almost.
Almost. I've been four times. Both on his own and in collaboration with other artists. And as you can see, the background is an installation. What do you call that? Just portal? Transportal?
Yeah, okay, I'll explain it. But
Okay,
yeah,
he'll explain
it's
all
one of
that
them,
in
the
a
first
little
of the
bit.
portals.
And he's currently focused on developing ecologically sustainable human habitations. All good stuff. I'll turn it over to you and you can elaborate any way you wish.
Okay. And yes, so that's a good little brief introduction. And I'm so glad to be here today with you to talk about all sorts of things besides what you mentioned in the bio. But yeah, to kick it off, like right behind me is this iconic image of this. It's called the 1111 Diamond Portal that I built for Burning Man after attending it for 5 years. I started going in '99, which was the first year that Burning Man actually evolved to its current city plan. I had planned to go in '95, which was the last year of no city plan and no rules. And I didn't make it out until '99. And so I've been attending almost every single year since then. But in 2004, I decided to start building these interactive portal installations, which use sound, sacred geometry, and color to provide an environment that's intended for the evolution of consciousness. Or even more so than that, I even called this diamond portal a key to shift the earth into the next vibrational dimension. And it's based on the golden ratio and the color, which was chosen without consciously realizing that it's the color of the heart chakra. And even the shape, you can see that that shape starts to make a heart shape, which I didn't realize in the shape until I built it. So it was a very heart chakra based installation. And when your heart rhythms are in golden ratio is when you're in a state of coherence or bliss. And that's something that the physicist Dan Winter discovered and then was used by the Heart Math Institute to create these devices that help get you into a state of coherence and bliss. So golden ratio in your heart rhythms is, very important. And this piece just came about like that. It was placed at Burning Man on the clock at 11:11, 11:11 being like an activation code that a lot of people see and are aligned with. And that's what began this whole over 20-year journey now of building these interactive portals for Burning Man. And, easily accessed through my website and my YouTube channel, all under the title Portal to the New Earth. So it's not, I don't really want to dive in and go and talk about these things because, like I say, they're easily accessed. I'd like to get into the backstory of how I came to do this work and, why I'm doing the work. So that's, more of what this conversation is going to be about, what I'm, titling Galactic Transformation Agent. So I suppose with that in mind, I mentioned that I kind of learned through a reading I had done by Lisa Renee of energetic synthesis in 2009, where she said that I'm actually from the Andromeda Galaxy, came in from another universe through the Andromeda Galaxy a long time ago to be here on planet Earth as part of what she would call like Nephilim rehabilitation. Nephilim is like this word from the Bible of the mix between the star beings and humans. And, I don't like going down the woo-woo rabbit hole too much with that kind of stuff, but that's clearly what's taking place here on Earth in some form or another, and it gets distorted quite a bit. Like actually, I've been kind of part of this community for the very long time, and I see that a great majority of it is kind of distorted or co-opted and controlled and kind of flaky. So it makes it very difficult for me to even want to be connected and be in it. But there is a small percentage of it that is extremely discerning and not being controlled even like Laura Eisenhower, someone that, we're both connected with and that I've been connected with. And I see that she is really tapping into very much so the undistorted truth. And then what happens though is the way the opposition works, the controllers that, are controlling the ascension, they turn the tides and the tables and make people who are actually telling the truth seem like they're the controlled ones. So it gets
Yeah.
very mixed bag. I don't know if you wanted to.
Masters of deception are really good at what they do, for sure.
Yeah, so it's really difficult to be discerning. It's kind of funny. I joke around and I say that because of that, I started the false co-opted fifth dimension ascension team. You know, but with that said, so recognizing and learning that the work that I'm doing here, and the fact that I consider what I'm doing to be like keys to shift the earth into the next dimension, and that using sacred geometry, sound, and color to create these environments that mostly go to Burning Man, but have been brought to other festivals, and people have had profound life-changing experiences by interacting with them. I use sound inside of these as this low frequency feedback device. Like I say, you could just access my YouTube and watch the videos, and you'll get to see that explain more. But these pieces vibrate with a random chaotic purring sound that seems to change when different people come and go. And I've actually met people that tell me that they actually can control the way it sounds through their meditations.
Hmm.
So, but that's like kind of like how it's activated through this real-time analog chaotic feedback, which is actually I met the physicist Nassim Haramein many years ago, actually at Burning Man, and then he
Nice.
saw some of my portals, and I showed him the quasar wave transducer, which is the name of this analog feedback device, which is just two bass guitar strings mounted on a bass speaker, feeding back. But the strings are tuned to subsonic notes that are like somewhere between like 5 and 15 hertz. I've never measured it, but they're a very low frequency, below audible, and they interact with each other to make this weird purring rumbling sound. And when Nassim saw that and experienced it, he was like, wow, that's very interesting. That is an example of how everything in the universe works on a feedback cycle, that everything is feeding back to create everything that we see in the universe. So it's kind of like the sound is representative of that. It also represents that the geometries, because I build other shapes that are very geometrical, that they're really representative of geometrical vibration energy patterns, not solid static patterns. So, with that said, that's been my intention. And the thing is, I don't really build these and want to be known as someone that builds interactive sculptures. I do these because I'm actively helping to try to facilitate this shift of consciousness taking place that we will all then choose to live and build and create our cities and towns and environments in the most ecologically harmonious, regenerative way that respects all of life and all of the everything, minerals and everything. Like humans would become organs of the earth to build and beautify the earth, not just for humans, but all life and integrating, all life into it. So that's been my lifelong goal. So, I also have a book that I wrote that is in two parts. The first part being about the portals, the geometries, the sound, earth grid energies, ley lines. But the second part is all about conceiving future environments. And that's what I really kicked off my whole lifelong work, which was learning about Buckminster Fuller, this amazing, 20th century scientist that he coined the word synergy, among other things. And before he died, he wrote these huge tomes of all of his understandings called synergetics. And then shortly after that, the Italian architect Paolo Solari, who was coined the word arcology, which is architecture and ecology integrated together. And he had these concepts of building or growing like cities as living organisms that are three-dimensional. And that's the main focus and path of what I'm trying to do and inspire other people to see that.
Awesome. What that particular structure behind you, is that made out of wood or metal?
It's wood. And yeah,
Wood.
and it's interesting because yeah, I work primarily with wood and metal, depending on what's required or needed for the structure. But also, I like to be able to work very economically or frugally. So actually, the wood in this one was donated from an old movie set. So it's quarter-inch plywood. I built the frame out of 2x4s, skinned the whole thing, made it modular. So each of the panels and center section come apart and can be brought to Burning Man and set up relatively quickly and easily. And and it's really nice to be wood, to touch it, and to feel it rather than metal. Like, of course, it
Right.
could be built out of metal, but it would get really hot and be hard, and it wouldn't be as nice of an experience to be sitting on or leaning against it. So, most of my pieces are plywood, and when I need to make things out of metal frames and things, I'll do that also.
Is it a different structure every year, or is it that one that you use over and over again?
Yeah, well, that's pretty clearly outlined. My first website that depicts and covers all of these is called transportals.org. And that is now linked to the newer website, portaltothenewearth.com. But if you just go to transportals.org, you'll see that I didn't build a new one every year. It was somewhat. It all varied, but like this one went 2 years in a row. And then my friend said they wouldn't help me bring it back. So I actually burned it by pushing it into the temple fire. Then the next year I was inspired to build a new one through reading a book called The Emerald Modem, A User's Guide to the Earth's Interactive Energy Body, that was by Richard Levitin, and it was inspired the next two portals that were built. So this was 2004 and 5. 2006, I did the Emerald Portal. 2007, the Sapphire Portal, which was this giant sky blue wall. And it depends. It totally depends. But every 2 years or thereabouts, or one will come back, or I used one with three different collaborations for 3 years, 2014, 15, and 16. And like I say, I don't really want to go into too much detail elaborating and talking about each one of these because I've done that so much and it's so easily accessed through the website and through the videos to learn about all that. I really want to go more into like the backstory of why they're there, why I do it, and those kind of details, which I think is much more significant because that's the whole idea of being a galactic transformation agent is to understand our place as humans incarnated here into Earth at this time of great change. And, especially now, 2026, this is what spring of 2026, and we're seeing so much stuff coming out. And when you go on social media and the internet and YouTube, you see so many different people talking about so many different things. And like you have to be discerning. There's huge amounts of AI deception. Like when 3i Atlas came flying through the solar system and was detected last summer, and all of last fall, people were tracking it. And then just on March, it flew past Jupiter. There's a lot of the majority of the information put out, I found to be fake AI bullshit. That was over 50% or more of the information. Then there was a huge amount of people that were looking at it from the new age, higher dimensional, like spiritual community and tuning in it on that level. And I feel a lot of those people did a very, very good job of discerning what it was from a higher dimensional level. And then the smallest amount, which is a good 10% were actual scientists collecting scientific data and trying to understand and see exactly what it was from a very 3D, realistic, real world level. And, there's no reason to discount the 3D reality, even if there is higher dimensional realities that don't logically fit into the 3D reality. Our world and consensus reality right now that we're living in is largely this very linear, empirical consensus reality that is based on science, that can do observations with telescopes and things like that. And that's how we got to be. And there's no reason to just throw that all out and say, no, anything is possible. And so I've been following it. I actually found a Substack recently that has been collecting all of the scientific data on 3i Atlas. And what was very interesting about 3i Atlas is the major sources for scientific information, such as NASA and other astronomical things, were suppressing large amounts of it. And most of the scientific data has to come from independent researchers that are able to use telescopes and instruments to see what's going on. And they collected all of it. And it was a very enigmatic object for sure. And I was very interested. And I have the latest portal I built is the lotus flower, and it's set up in my backyard. And I held events for people to come together on the auspicious days when it was closest to the sun, when it was closest to the Earth, and when it was closest to Jupiter. We had gatherings just to like kind of meet and tune in and discuss what was going on with 3i Atlas. So that was something very interested in, and yet the main reason I'm talking about it right now isn't to discuss what 3i Atlas is about. Why I'm mentioning it is because of the huge amount of fake AI information that is out there right now. That is like he and then it's interesting to see the comments. Like recently, a friend of mine, he totally fell for this fake news report that used a real credible newscaster and made a fake AI version of him. And he said that three aircraft carriers were sunk by the Iranians using Chinese missiles. And even though it had a disclaimer saying this is fictional, he fully believed it. And then you look at the comments, and half the comments are people that are believing it because it seems and looks
Yeah.
extremely credible. And then the other half of the comments are people that are like, this is AI bullshit.
Yeah.
Hello, wake up. But that's part of what's happening right now in our field of information that's out there right now, to be discerning of it. And and so that's, part of I got a little off track, but I'm trying to talk mostly about what's taking place with our reality, with humanity awakening, and the shift that's taking place. And so, like I said, I've been part of this for a long time. And I remember back in the 90s, I got the book Bringers of the Dawn by Barbara Marciniak. And that book is still spot on and relevant today. And I really feel she did a great job. But in a moment, I'm going to go on into talking about channeled Pleiadian information. But besides that, that was in the 90s. And I went on this trip around the country, and they were all looking for communities. And all these people were talking about the oceans rising and the devastation and things changing. And of course, here we are 30 years later, and pretty much things are still pretty normal. So, and I know our friend Catherine is talking about a pole shift happening. And there
Yes.
are certain realities to these great earth changes that are possible, but status quo seems to overwhelm them all, and things seem to just keep going on and normally, and that there's a good reason for that too. Um, I also read a book called The Starseed Transmissions in 1984 by Ken Carey, who went on to write The Return of the Bird Tribe. And these books are excellent, but it's channeled Pleiadian stuff. So I think it's now time for me to dive into this whole thing of channeling Pleiadians or Galactic Federation of Light or the Arcturians, because and and even going to these conferences where all these people are talking about, bringing this information forth. And a lot of the information is really spot on, really powerful, really useful for us to awaken and to see the bigger picture. But to really see through it all and to be really, really discerning. And this has come up recently. It was a Dan Winter post from a month or so ago, a YouTube video where he brought on some of his friends. And I kind of agree with this perspective. The Galactic Federation of Light, the Arcturians, the Andromedans. I'm an Andromedan. Don't trust me. The Pleiadians. They're all beings of light and wanting to bring a resolution to this, the negative impact taking place here on Earth by these free will. We can call it the Illuminati, the Draconians. The lots of names, the Cabal, all these negative entities that have that have been ruling the earth and controlling humanity to their own best interests. Well, the bigger picture is that these higher dimensional beings of light, they're the ones that set up and created the lower dimensional disconnected from source draconians and all of those to have wreak havoc and create this darkness, this shadow, this control paradigm, so that then they can come along and say, oh, we're here to save you. And it's like, no, they're not here to save us. They can kind of point it out, but we got to see even beyond that, that it's only us, each individually, as divine connection to divine source, sovereignty, and that we're not here to rely on any outside help. Oh my God, I just saw like Emilio Ortiz, who I follow very closely because he has a lot of good people on, just had Ismail Perez on. And, Ismail Perez says tons of amazing, right on, great things, but he is 100% co opted, fake ascension, control, opposition. And the whole talk started off by saying, oh, there's 6 negative timelines, 6 positive timelines. And one of those positive timelines is the Galactic Federation is going to have to land here on Earth to get rid of the negative beings. And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, no, that's like so not the way. The way out is for us to awaken to our own individual sovereign divine connection to source. We are the creator beings. You don't give your power away to these higher dimensional Arcturians or Pleiadians or anything. They're playing with us. They're the ones that cause the whole problem. So I don't know if you want to chime in and have questions or thoughts because, I'm kind of on a rant here.
Your ranting is quite welcome because you know what you're ranting about. But I have to say that there have been lots of negative responses to Ismail, and he's gone off the deep end at some of the conferences he's been. And I pegged him as what you just said too. He was in Mount Shasta a few years ago at Rob Potter's event, and something he just you know how it is when somebody's just not right, and they're saying a lot of the right things, but it's like you don't know why it doesn't resonate with you, but it doesn't. He was
And of
definitely one
course,
of those.
and he came out of nowhere and had a huge amount of
Exactly.
following. And so, because we already mentioned him, I'll mention a few more. And the people, though, that are co-opted have so much attention. They have millions of followers. And that means that our discussion here today is just going to be sidelined. We're lucky to get 50 views. And then out of those 50 views, those people will be like, yes, right on.
Yeah,
But we're not going
exactly.
to have a million views or even 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000. But, I've been following very closely since after after 2020, we'll leave it at that. Who came onto the scene was Robert Edward Grant. And I was actually invited to give a talk, flown out to this transition talks in West Virginia on the same to open for him. And I've met him other times at Burning Man and other talks. And he won't look me in the eye. He won't listen to my talks. He won't have anything to do with me. As
Wow.
soon as I talk to him, he just says, "Oh," and he walks away. Or or someone like Billy Carson. I don't just wanted to throw him in there as examples of these people that have huge amounts of following, speak really powerful, really interesting stuff. I mean, I got to say, I have to listen to everything Robert Edward Grant says to just know where he's at and what he's saying. And so much of the stuff he says is so profoundly right on and amazing. But that's how it works, I guess. The co-option, it wouldn't be a co-option if they couldn't fool everyone and if they didn't have all the information that you want to hear. And that's kind of like the answer without twisting it to control it. So, oh my God, it's just such a conundrum that we're in here right now.
Well, I just met Billy Carson here in San Rafael, where you were at,
Yeah, yeah.
and he was. I thought he was a pretty cool guy, and I do like listening to him. I don't listen to him religiously. Why do you think he's controlled or steered in a certain narrative?
Before I go into that, I want to know why you thought he was a cool guy and you liked him.
Well, just because he's charismatic. You know, he's definitely knows how to articulate things, and it seems like he's focused on the pyramids and stuff like that he talks about. So he's not really talking as much about these metaphysical things, as far as I've heard. He's more grounded in the ancient history stuff, and
Yeah.
he is very business oriented. He seems to be very focused on money and making. Like I asked him how much he's charging for his Egyptian tours, and he said, "Oh, 13,000, but we stay in 5-star hotels and all this kind of stuff." And it's like,
See, I know Robert Edward Grant has made all those discoveries in Egypt, and he sells out his tours at $10,000 a person. Anyway, you know, it's almost like if I have to point out why I think Billy Carson is co-opted, well, then you're not going to get it. To me, it's just obvious. It's just like
well, I can't
plain
say I
as
listened
day.
to him enough to really have focused on it as much as maybe you have. I don't know. Um,
No, but that's the thing. These people are so personable. They're saying so much of the right. Everything they're saying is right on, and that's almost like a key to be more discerning.
well, I'm
It's
definitely discerning. I'm not saying I believe everything
Yeah,
he says. I just
yeah. I
uh,
know, I know. It's okay. It's almost like we don't we made that point, and it's
yeah,
almost like we need to get onto another point about let's even like start to dive into some of like the secret space program people that
yeah.
they get a lot of attention. Am I going to say that they're all co-opted? No, not necessarily. I believe all their experiences are real, and they're part of something though that is a bigger picture. And like, how can that stuff like that, or even all of the psyops and conspiracy theories? So, conspiracy theory was invented when they said Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. And it should be pretty apparent that it wasn't just him shooting him and that the CIA had a bunch of shooters and they took him out because he wanted to get us, back onto a gold standard and all these things. There's a lot, you've researched JFK and what he was doing. They had to take him out and put LBJ in and get us back, big time into Vietnam and that whole thing. And then, some of the other really big conspiracy points, besides the other assassinations that took place throughout the 60s, would be like the Oklahoma City government building bombing, Timothy McVeigh, obviously 9/11, huge one. And then also the first of these that was kind of a side psyop, proving the moon landings faked. And there's, I would say 50% of the people I know 100% believe that the moon landing never happened. They're just because so much information was put out there to prove it's faked. Even though all the real information is plainly available, people don't take the time to try to find the facts. I took the time. I'm a huge fan of the Apollo missions. I'm a huge fan of all the things that happened in the 60s, psychedelic rock music, muscle cars, drag racing, and building a freaking Saturn V rocket and a lunar module and putting men in it and actually going to the moon and landing on the moon. Like huge physical, technological, cool stuff. Everything, like I said, to me, in my mind, they all merge together. Marshall stacks, nitromethane burning Hemi engines, and Saturn V rockets are all the same tip of what the 60s were about. And of course, psychedelics, LSD and the whole shift of consciousness that happened then. And the Apollo program was amazing that we were able to do that. That was they didn't even have handheld calculators. They did that with slide rules. And the computer that they used on the lunar module to land on the moon had kilobytes of memory, not even 1 megabyte, kilobytes to run this computer. But it was and the computer was made by hand. You can see there's people that have videos online about it because they have, versions of it that didn't fly and that they still use just for the fun of it to simulate moon landings. And there's 16 millimeter film, which is very high resolution, black and white, taken out of the window of every single moon landing. And with the audio of the commander and the pilot talking to the commander with their altitude, rate of descent, and percent fuel left as you see out the window coming down, landing on the moon. And if you watch a few of those and think that that's faked, I mean, they're pretty cool. I mean, I'd love to see the actual 16 millimeter high res footage because there's only little, computer, low res transfers of it. So
Well, this
now Elon Musk and SpaceX and all these rockets, I mean, come on. Anti-gravity and free energy is real and it's been suppressed. I follow Stephen Greer closely, but I think Stephen Greer is completely co-opted also. But, he talks about this repression of this information. And then all these scientists that know about this that are being killed or disappearing lately. It's like, come on. The free energy, anti-gravity. Those are facts. Those are things. Yeah. Anyway,
well, I
I'm sorry.
agree
I'm
with that.
ranting and ranting. Why
If
don't you
St-
reel me in with a question or
if
keep
Stephen
me on
Greer
track
was
here?
if Stephen I mean Stephen Greer seems to be a controlled narrative type of guy where they only want us to know a certain portion of what reality is, and he's keeping it, tame, whereas the reality of it is way beyond anything that he's revealing. Um, well, as far as the secret space program and that kind of stuff, um, I just from all the people I've listened to over the years, it seems to me, and this is I don't know, of course, and probably not very few of us really do know the truth. We're just going by all the different things we've heard throughout the time that we've been researching this stuff. I've just heard that the actual NASA based moon landing and all that kind of stuff was basically a way to program into the public that this is as far advanced as we are at the moment, whereas in reality, in the background, they've been doing these things long before. Like, I don't know if you've listened to Dan Cooper with Laura Eisenhower. He claims that
Yeah.
supposedly the Nazis won World War II, and in 1952 they took over every country and corporation, and they were the first to make it to space and the moon and blah blah blah, and that they've been doing
And
this all along.
Antarctica.
And Antarctica. I mean, our friend Brad Olson is very much in the Antarctica camp, writing books about it.
Yeah.
So um, it's very, very I mean, and I just take it as any of this is possible, because I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, so good. That's great. That's a great way to, for me to chime in now. Any of this is possible. So, my perspective on what reality is that anything is possible. But we've been groomed into a consensus reality. And there's a beauty to this. I have to say, I really appreciate this very linear kind of history that we have, and that we've gone through the Industrial Revolution, and now through the 20th century, we went through, inventing airplanes and computers, and now we're in the 21st century, and everything is very linear, and we have all these, like, things that are consensus reality rather than anything is possible and anything can happen. That's a bit too much. We need to have like a way for consciousness to interface with a reality that makes sense. And so we do have this very kind of linear 3D consensus reality that humanity's been evolving to this point now, where, a major shift can take place to, other dimensions and other ways of being, where we recognize the underlying truth to all reality. Of course, all through the 20th century, spiritual traditions would flourish with different gurus, wanting to teach self-realization and things like that, to learn the true nature of consciousness and things like that. Of course, one of the things that really annoys me is the monotheistic religions, the Abrahamic religions, which of course are just Judaism, Christianity, and Islam or Muslim. I don't even know how to call it. But all three of those, and it's interesting because even though it's really weird. There's there's very few Jewish people in the world. It's only like, I forget how many million, but it's like 15 million. And most of them are in Israel or New York, I guess, or running Hollywood. But then Christianity and Muslim has like a billion or so each, which means that the majority of humans are not into any of those religions. And those religions, though, have total sway over our current like governments and paradigm and way and banking and all those things. That's infiltrated that. And basically, my view on that is any being that says that they're God, you could pretty much be sure they're not God. God's never going to say he's God. I love Native American spiritual teachings. The Native Americans call God great mystery.
yeah,
That makes sense. The great
totally
mystery. I
agree with
follow,
that
of
one.
course, Carlos Castaneda's teachings of Don Juan, explaining our cosmology of what existence is, emanations of light and the assemblage point that, creates our reality of what our awareness is. So, it's infinite. And there is a creator, there is a God, and that's everything, everything that's ever possible in all of time and space is manifested. And then there's the spark within each one of us that makes us able to be a being, the direct connection to divine source and divinity. And we don't need to go through these religions, to have that connection. They're control paradigms. So,
I was just
that's
gonna say that.
my view of that. And I don't know how we're going to get around it.
Yeah, I was just
But
gonna
with
say
that
it. That's
being
all
said, that
about
anything's
control.
possible. So, yeah, yeah, control. We're in a very much control paradigm. And, and I love this. It was years ago that Laura Eisenhower used this. I haven't heard her use it recently, but I've adopted it. It's the dark teachers, that are here. And they're all of this control, all this negative paradigm is here for us to awaken to our own light. And the thing is, this was also, I think it was a conversation Laura had with Magenta Pixie, and I love this one. She basically said there's 3 points. First point is to recognize that we're in a control paradigm. Second point, I do not consent. Once you see it, I'm not consenting to it. But the third
Right.
and the most difficult of them isn't to hate them and want to destroy them and get rid of them. Because if you do that, you're playing their game. That's their game. You have to love them. You have to see them as the dark teacher here to guide us back to light. And then our role is to help them return to source and to light, to love them and to see the role that they play. To hate them and to want to destroy them for all the evil, horrible things that they've done is just falling into that same vibration, that same mentality of that they are part of. So to free ourselves from that, we need to see that all is love and to love all these dark teachers, all these negative, horrible things are all here just on our path to awaken. And so, like I say, I follow a lot of these one of my favorites, which people who are listening to this should go and look up her channel, Rebecca Rose Barfoot, Sirius Blue. Sirius like the star, not serious like I'm really serious. And her channel has all of her videos where she remembers not only her life in the secret space program, but also being groomed and being in the satanic ritual abuse and pedophile. She was, brought around and she and the one of the things I love most about her in particular over all the other people that bring this information forth is the way she speaks. She speaks in the most calm, loving, peaceful tone, and just listening to her voice talk about these horrific things in a very calm and centered way. And also, she uses light language, which I don't haven't activated or used, but then you hear her light language. And so that's why I really like her. And I want to know and hear these incredible stories that don't make sense in our normal 3D paradigm, but are very real for her and very real for all these other people. How can that be? Because as you said, anything is possible. Reality isn't just the 3D paradigm, linear, logical one that we're immersed in our consensus reality. That one is very real. And it's really, like I said, I'm very much grateful for it because it's really beautiful to have like such a grounded consensus way that all of us humans can see the world instead of everything just being anything, like on a DMT trip, which I've only done DMT 3 times. And that was enough to see like, whoa, there's a lot going on a much higher frequency level that is the underlying substrate of all of reality. And so, with that said, though, we're starting to merge timelines and realities and to see that all of these other possibilities are possible. But we shouldn't worry about them. We shouldn't have to worry about, great catastrophic destructions or evil aliens or AI taking over and all that stuff. All of those things are possible. Anything is possible. And those are possibilities. If you worry about them, then you're going to bring them in and you're going to focus on it. Reality is what we focus our attention on. And I really love Tom Kenyon. He wrote like the Hathor material back in the 90s where he channeled the Hathors, great information. He also uses his voice to channel the Hathors with all these amazing healing meditations. So just look up Tom Kenyon. One of his meditations he released over 10 years. I've been following him since 2010. So it was somewhere about, at least 10 years ago or more. It's called The Sphere of All Possibilities. And it's this meditation where you imagine a sphere that's big enough to encompass the entire universe as you know it to be. So right now, scientists are saying, for a while they were saying it was like 13.5 billion light years, but I think now they're even saying it could be like 40 billion light years. I mean, what's the difference? 13 billion, 40 billion? It's freaking a lot of light years, but it's a certain amount. It's a certain size. It's finite. It's not infinite light years. So you imagine this giant sphere that every last galaxy is contained within, and you're at the center of it. And this thing is so big that it can create any possible future. And so then you just dream and know the future you want to be in and see points of light from the sphere coming to you to create the future that we want to be in.
So
And so
basically,
I'm
every,
aligned with a very organic, heart centered, loving, peaceful, beautiful, organic earth. And so we can just choose that and we can make that happen just like that. And that's the vision and the goal I have. And that's what I want to inspire people and make them see that that is the possible way of reality and how we can use our power and our consciousness.
so it sounds like what you're talking about is some kind of reality surfing where every possibility exists in some potential parallel reality. And our consciousness and where we choose to focus at is the reality we actually merge into. And any of those, depending on where we focus our consciousness, is possible. So every possibility.
There, there seems to be evidence to support this in that there are these realities that don't make sense in a 3D way, and yet many people concur and bring forth these stories, and they're, to me, extremely credible. They're not just making them up to be, for a crazy reason, and
Right.
so that's experience. And actually, the book that really kicked me off, and I show this when I give my galactic transformation agent talk if I have visuals, and I could have brought up visuals, but we don't need it. Our conversation is enough. But I read when I first went off to college in 1976. At 17 years old, I escaped high school a year early, so I was really lucky. And I went to Emory University, and the when you go to Emory, it's this big university in the middle of Atlanta. Before you even sign up for any classes, there's rush week, and all of the incoming males and I guess females go to the sororities, but the males all go around to these fraternities, and there were 13 fraternities there, and each one had its own kind of character. The Southern Baptists, the New York Jews, the jocks, the nerds, and then there were the freaks, the pot smoking, cocaine snorting, alcohol drinking, LSD taking, all of that flowing abundantly. And I was like, and the guy that got me to join that fraternity, he dropped out 2 years later, moved to Athens, Georgia, to form a rock band, REM. So
Oh,
Peter
wow.
Buck was the guy that actually got me to join this fraternity. And in this fraternity are other very smart, notable people. But it was very cool being in this really group of super cool. And of course, one of the first things we did was go to see the Grateful Dead play on acid, stuff like that. And though I was reading, so I was going to school studying physics, like you read in there. But what I was reading was the Illuminatus trilogy by Robert Anton Wilson and Dick Shea. And then Robert Anton Wilson published a book called The Cosmic Trigger. And I think it came out right then in like 77 or so, maybe 75, 76. And it was his whole nonfiction backstory of everything happening in his life and everything he was studying at that time. And it covers every esoteric metaphysical information from tarot to runes to the I Ching to ancient Egypt to the Nordics to you name it. It's a smorgasbord of all, Blavatsky and Crowley and anything that has to do with spiritual esoteric teachings. But he also was very close friends with Timothy Leary, who had been in prison throughout the middle of the 70s. And he interviewed him and got all of his information. And Timothy Leary had come up, and it's very well outlined in this book, of four terrestrial circuits and four higher dimensional circuits, the octave. And the four terrestrial circuits go from one dimension of like minerals, two dimensions plant, three-dimensional animals, fourth dimension humans existing in time and having information and books and libraries and records and all the things we do as fourth dimensional humans, our culture. But then fifth dimensional starts to go backwards, where it also outlines very much the spiritual teachings, though. And fifth dimensional, you go back to a cellular level. Sixth dimensional, you're at a molecular level, which is, I might have missed a level here, which is the DNA. You become conscious of your DNA, which has been passed down to our earliest ancestors. And then at the seventh dimensional, I might have missed one I said, but anyway, atomic consciousness. When your consciousness is vibrating at the center of atomic, you're connected to all consciousness in the universe. And so I don't know where the eighth. I think I skipped one. It doesn't. Fifth is what I think that was sixth, seventh, and eighth are those cellular, molecular, and atomic. And that's like nirvana. When you reach atomic consciousness, you have a consciousness that can be described by the yogis when they become one with the universe. All of time and space is one because all atoms are all connected as one. All atoms are the same throughout all time and space. Anyway, that was a divergent from what I wanted to, the point I wanted to make, because Timothy Leary also made this really great point that there's so many different ideas and people and things that are going in all sorts of different directions. Anything is possible. And yet there is this consensus status quo that's like a giant anchor dragging behind us that keeps things all kind of normal for all of us. So that as much as radical changes could be happening and all kinds of crazy earth shifts and pole shifts and AI taking over or this or that or anything, that could shift reality very drastically, those are all pulling us forward into the future, but it's being held back by this anchor of the consensus status quo. That means each morning you wake up and things are pretty much the same. And, maybe a little bit of change, maybe the stock market dips or this or that. But, for the most part, reality stays in this very sane, normal consensus thing. Not to say that we're these other extreme forms that are coming into being, such as AI and things, aren't playing on us moving into the future, but they're kept in check by this status quo. And I agree very much with that. And yet I'm also looking at and these extreme possible shifts because I really think, and I think it's time in our conversation, we've been on for quite a while, for me to shift the background away from being out there on the playa at the 1111 Diamond Portal. And before I shift away from it, though, I just got to throw out there, it was over a year ago that I had a conversation about how I took a photograph of Elon Musk standing in front of the Diamond Portal at Burning Man 2004. Now, in 2004, no one knew who Elon Musk was. He wasn't a public figure at that time. So I didn't realize who I was taking a picture of until 2021 when a friend of mine looked through all of my Burning Man photos and goes, "Oh my God, look." And we look, and it's this picture of Elon Musk. Here, let's see. I can hold it up. Voila.
Oh, wow.
There he is.
Are you
Okay.
sure that
So,
wasn't his clone?
like it's pretty funny. Well, anyway, I don't need to dive into it more because I did a 45-minute video on my YouTube channel diving into the whole reason how I came to meet him and take that. And I'll just say very briefly, it's because I felt like Burning Man had been infiltrated by covert operatives that knew the Diamond Portal was actually the key that would shift the Earth into the next dimension, and that they were watching and following me. And I met him because I was trying to escape from the covert operatives.
Wow.
Yeah. So, okay. So go watch that. Go to Portal to New Earth YouTube channel. Watch Elon Musk at the 1111 Diamond Portal 2004. So
I'll
let's now
check it
shift
out.
modes here to what I'm really interested in, which would be creating. And now, mind you, I've been mentioning AI over and over. Well, I asked ChatGPT to design a city, and I was trying to get it to design a city I've been working on for 40 years called the 12 Spiral City, and it wouldn't follow my prompts. And I got super frustrated, and I just said, okay, just design a three-dimensional, ecologically integrated city. And with a few prompts, I came up with this thing, and I like it. So I used it. I put it on my business card. I use it, for the last year or so to kind of show
Wow.
people what I'm interested and what I think is possible.
That's
And
pretty
then
cool.
I like this one. People say, well, how much is it going to cost to build that? And I'm like, cost? If you pay for this with money, it's just going to be another skyscraper or strip mall or suburban sprawling homes. Those things are built with money. How much, you see the tree over there? How much did that tree pay the earth for the minerals? How much did it pay the sky for the water? And how much did it pay the sun to shine on it to grow into a tree? That's how much this city is going to cost. It's going to be grown like a natural living organism. But with we as humans will have our input. We'll use our hands. We'll use our input. We'll use our minds to create and make for the most beautiful, ecologically integrated environment that is part of nature. But that's my ultimate goal. And
So
people say,
re
yeah, that'll
re
happen in maybe 1,000 years. But the way things are going, it's not going to happen anytime soon. And I'm like, no, it's going to happen in 10 years.
so it's
We'll
reactivating
be
our
living there.
indigenous wisdom as the indigenous tribes of the world
Very much
once
so. Yes.
interacted with nature
Thanks for
to work in harmony with it instead of against it. We've been, Western
very much
culture is
so.
all about.
But why didn't the indigenous people live like this? They lived in teepees. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, go ahead with this. It's a great point connecting to indigenous
Well,
wisdom and
that's
stuff
the
like
first
that. So
thing
please.
I think when I see that is it's very much it's humans becoming part of the ecosystem instead of the slave masters of it, where you're using the natural elements and working in harmony with nature instead of being the one that dominates it with the whip and and the control system and all that. That looks very much like an organically based way of living in harmony with the earth taken to a much higher technological level.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You use the word technology. So
Yep, you froze up there.
we think of Earth, and not only will it grow a whole nother tree with thousands of apples, but then you have more seeds to grow more. That's high tech. Our bodies are high tech. Nature is the highest form of technology. And it's so, so much more high tech than computers or cell phones that we can't even see it as technology. We just think, oh, it's nature. But no. And also, like Arthur C. Clarke said, that, technology is indistinguishable from magic by people that can't see it. And that I forget, I kind of screwed that quote up, but it's and even things, so indigenous wisdom or things like magic, real magic, not like a magician doing some illusion, but tapping into the nature of how the universe operates to make miracles and magical things happen. That's very real. And so that's the whole point. I mean, I think, we could sum up this conversation. We could go on for hours and hours on all kinds of rabbit holes. But like I said earlier, that we have to acknowledge that we're in a control paradigm, not consent to it, love those beings that helped us to wake up to it, wake up to our own connection to our own divine source of sovereign divine source, that we are ultra powerful creative beings, and that we can shift out of this matrix, this control matrix. you know Nature is real. Trees, minerals, the sun, water, those are real. Governments and money, banking, those aren't real. People made that stuff up and told you have to do it that like that. There's
Yeah.
no reality to that. A rock is real. The sun shining on you, that's real. Having to pay taxes or obey a law, that's just something that somebody said to control you. It's like, no, I don't consent. You can take your laws, you can take your banks, and you can shove them up your ass and get the fuck out of here. I want to live like this.
Right
That's
on,
that's the whole
brother.
that's my whole story, and let people know that we're galactic beings incarnated into this incredible human 3D body here on Earth to confront this crazy shit show that's taking place. Just wake the fuck up and just let's make it happen like that.
One of one
Any
of
other
my
questions?
one of
Good.
my favorite phrases that was coined by Laura Eisenhower is "We live on planet mindfuck," and that's exactly what it is. They mindfucked us into playing their game when
Yep.
all along we didn't really have to. They
Yep.
just made it seem like there were no other alternatives because they did a bunch of bad things to a bunch of people and left us in fear, like, oh my God, they might do that to me. And instead of rising up and saying, no, we don't consent, we were like, oh, we're too scared to say otherwise. So, yeah, you're right on with that. True spirit of the 60s there,
Right.
which
And
I've
and I've
always
been
resonated with. I was born in the 60s, so I
right.
totally
And
resonate.
and like the spirit of the 60s, of course, has a lot to do with the psychedelic revolution at that time. And I've been very closely connected to the psychedelic community. I mentioned Timothy Leary, who, after I read that book, I actually got to meet a few times. And then in 1986, I got to meet Terence McKenna at a 5-day retreat here in Joshua Tree. And I highly recommend this. They recorded a 4-hour talk he gave, and I'm on the second and third hours arguing with him about 2012 being the end of time back in 1986.
Oh,
And so,
wow.
I've been, and I really very much aligned with the psychedelic community because it's a powerful tool to, it's funny, I was going to say break open the head. And that's Daniel Pinchbeck's book that was highly received on psychedelics. And I actually knew Daniel Pinchbeck before he wrote that book. And then, was friends with him throughout that whole era of the 2000s when he wrote 2012 Return to Quetzalcoatl. But he's gone off the deep end and whatever, but psychedelics, and that's the thing. Psychedelics is the thing. You get the message and you hang up. I don't do psychedelics anymore. I
Right.
see what's out there. I understand the depths that you can see through psychedelics, but to keep doing them isn't the thing. It's get back here to Earth in our 3D, shifting to, I guess, 5D, but to start to create this beautiful new organic Earth. And and don't pay attention to all the fear mongering. AI is going to take over. The poles are going to shift. This, that. I mean, yes, the oceans are going to rise and tsunamis and and those things can be useful to help shift things, but we can also go in a very graceful, easy way, which is kind of what's been happening. There's a lot of positive forces that are easing us into this shift, and that's what I'm aligned with. We can just do this because we love to do it. And I just also want to mention I'm part of this design science online studio that started in 2020, and I'm in the fourth cohort of it. And I just met through it. I've been meeting all kinds of wonderful people. And if you go to my YouTube channel, like you'll see this guy named Umair Zia, and he had a great interview with him. But I only just met this last weekend this guy, and Umair was from Pakistan. And this other guy I just met named Govind. I can't remember his last name, but he is exactly on this line of these organic growing architecture. And he had like a dozen or more examples of this. And to that end, I found before I generated this, I'll just shift to this one. This is one I found that I loved also. Totally
Wow.
AI. But it just shows how we can integrate into nature, beautiful, harmonious landscapes where we live, in magical ways, even like we've seen in these movies, the different movies where the beings live in the trees. I forget which. I'm getting mixed up.
Avatar.
Lord Avatar, also
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings had that. Even in Star Wars, those the Ewoks, that live
Right.
in on the planet. All these different movies show these other races living in the most magical, beautiful, harmonious ways.
That
So we're
reminds me of a
imagining it.
Roger Dean album cover from the 70s, like a
Well,
Yes album cover or something.
exactly. And yet, well, Avatar ripped him off without giving him credit.
Yeah.
100% ripped him off. He's on Facebook. He's still doing new drawings, and I follow him on Facebook. But yeah, and I love Yes. Yes is one of my all-time favorite rock bands. Just
Same.
complete. And to that end, Steve Howe has a version of Yes right now. They just released a new album called Aurora. But never mind Steve Howe, they kicked John Anderson out, the lead singer, and now he's playing with this band that formed during the lockdown called the Band of Geeks. And they tour and with John Anderson singing, and they're actually better than Yes, because they're like these super talented musicians that can play exactly what Yes played precisely. And the
Oh,
one
nice.
downside, which is funny when you listen to Band of Geeks, is when they're covering and copying each of the members of Yes, it's amazing. But when they're allowed to improvise by themselves, it's not so great because they're not as talented as the people in Yes. They're talented in a different way. There's people that have a talent that are able to, copy technically things, and that's what they have. But they got John Anderson fronting them, and it sounds amazing.
I'll have to check that out. I'm not really crazy about the newer Yes albums, but
Yeah.
um, I haven't heard of that one, but I'll have to
Yeah,
check that
Steve
out.
Howe. And the thing is, Steve Howe was a formidable creative source of that band. I mean, they all
Oh,
were.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
a band, but he definitely wrote and created a lot of that music. So he's still alive. He's old and frail. Oh my God, but freaking love that
Those
stuff.
early albums were magic, pure magic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Fragile and Close to the Edge. Those two alone were, benchmark. They
Well,
did a lot of other great stuff,
I've
but
always
those
been
are
partial to Tales from Topographic Oceans, even though that's a divisive one.
exactly. I never got into that one. And then of course they got rid of Wakeman and they had that what was it with
Relayer.
Relayer, which is great, but then they got him back for Going for the One, which is
Yeah.
one of my favorites.
Those are all good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Hey, just to let you know, no matter how much stuff I try to store in my external hard drive, my memory keeps telling me that my computer is full. So I don't know why
Uh-oh.
this is happening. So anyway, just to
I
let you
think we
know,
got it.
we may have to I may have to abruptly
Yeah,
end.
I think no, I feel very, very good about our conversation today. And even this last stuff, which didn't need to be in it, just geeking out over Yes, but it's fun. And for people that don't know it, they're going to be, oh, let me look that up. And they're going to be
More
like,
people
whoa.
need to hear classic Yes, for
You
God's
know,
sake.
I was into Yes early, then I got out of him, and then I got back into him, and I found this paper by a professor of music at some university where he dissected that song "Close to the Edge." That's a complete album side, and he
Yeah.
basically came up with this thesis that it's about the Buddha's enlightenment, about how, the Buddha sat by the river under a tree and was going to kill himself, but then became enlightened. And he basically equates Close to the Edge with this moment of enlightenment. And I want to have Close to the Edge played at my funeral, super loud, for
Good
people
choice.
all to get blasted by that.
Well, the Tales from Topographic Ocean was kind of a sprawling double album, but it was based on the Hindu texts, the Vedic
Right.
texts. So John Anderson at that point had really gotten into Eastern spiritualism and philosophies and stuff, and he kind of went too far for his fan
Yeah.
base and
Yeah.
the rest of the band as well.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I have something about that album. If you can sit through it and just like not be in a hurry. All the other albums are more instant gratification. That one's more of you kind of have to sink into it over a longer period of time. And then even then, it doesn't appeal to everybody. But
Cool. Well, I'll
I
check
kind
it
of like
out.
all their stuff. I even like the first two albums, which before Steve
Oh,
Howe.
before, yeah,
Yeah.
that was weird. But Fragile was when they really hit their mark with, Roundabout and all that. Heart of the Sunrise. Oh my God.
Yeah, that was.
Oh my God.
And the Yes
And
album
then,
was pretty good too.
yeah. All right. Well, let's get back on track to wrap this up, though, because this was a great conversation, and I
Yeah.
really feel like, I gave the message that I really want to give.
Well, that's
And
good.
do you have any last, thoughts? And like, hopefully, I don't know how you do it, but you'll put links and things, like
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
already mentioned
I'll
numerous times. If you just go to portaltothenewearth.com, that links to my YouTube, that links to my book. It's pretty much Portal to the New Earth. A
Oh,
lot of
tell me,
people
tell me.
get it mixed up and they use portals. It's not, it's singular, and it's to the, not to stuff like that. You can see it right here at the bottom under my name.
Just say a little bit about your book, because that's where I met you. Is at the conference. You were sitting next to Brad Olson selling books, and
Right.
you have a really big, thick book called Portal
That
to the New World, and it was like,
New
wow, that
Earth.
is
Don't
New Earth.
mix
I'm
it
sorry,
up.
I'm sorry, and it looked
See?
so cool. And then you kind of pulled us out when we were out in the dance floor or whatever, and come see my installation. You had a really cool installation at the Marin Civic Center,
The Sky
and
Portal.
it was perfectly placed, overlooking the pond, and you had some ambient chant. Was it chanting?
No, it's Tibetan bowls that were being
Tibetan
played
bowls.
in.
That's it. And it was like, wow, this is so cool. So you really know your stuff with that. But say a little bit about your book.
Yeah, so the book was a long time in coming. I thought about it for many years and then finally sat down in 2018 to write it with the help of a writing coach friend, and then eventually had him do some ghost writing for it. And we even had connections to Inner Traditions and North Atlantic Books and several publishers that I really hoped would pick it up, and no one picked it up. So I just went ahead and I printed 1,111 copies of it, and it's available as a PDF on my website. I try to have it, and I have to redo this so that you subscribe to my Substack. But right now, you can just click and open it up so you can see the whole book for free, because I just want people to be inspired. And so I self-publish it. And the one thing I really dropped the ball on, though, is I have not made a print-on-demand version that you can buy on Amazon. So the only way to get the book is either order one of these beautiful hardcover, signed and numbered limited edition versions of it, or just go to my website and see the PDF, which I think you could even download from the internet if you need to.
Wow.
But I should make a print on demand. And so like I just mentioned earlier, it's divided into two very distinct parts. The first part is a chapter on sound, a chapter sacred geometry, a chapter on earth grid energies like ley lines and sacred ancient megalithic sites, and then how they're all incorporated into the various portals I've built for 20 years at Burning Man. And then part two, a whole nother book, Conceiving Future Environments, the Sacred Re-inhabitation of Gaia. And that starts off with a chapter on Buckminster Fuller, which is such a huge inspiration. And this design science studio I mentioned is based on Buckminster Fuller's work largely. And then Paolo Solari and other visionary architects that have conceived of all of these, future ecological cities. And then I synthesize them all together into this view of a 12 spiral city that grows over time. But then I ended on a very much more practical level. And I should mention one of the greatest inspirations is Victor Schauberger. He was an Austrian forester that before World War I was tending to an ancient prince's primordial forest that had never been logged. It was just kept as this, under the princes. And then World War I came and they needed to log it. And he
Ah,
figured out how water works and was able to make these flumes that would to get all the logs out. But what he did is he understand the very essence of water. His understandings of water are still not recognized fully yet today. There are many people working on water and understanding it, but Victor Schauberger was so ahead of his time, and he actually figured out how to make a over unity free energy device using implosive energy, not explosive. All of our current paradigm is based on explosion. Our engines and rockets and everything, and even steam generators that make electricity. We're burning fuel, exploding, burning things. Whereas nature works in a cooling, implosive force. And my favorite quote of Victor Schauberger's is, he said Newton asked the wrong question. He should have asked, how did the apple get up there?
ah,
And if you understand the principle of life and nature, how did the apple get up there? Well, a seed fell on the ground, and then water came from the sky, and then this plant grew against gravity, negentropic or syntropic. Things don't go against gravity; things fall down. Things cannot. Where does a force come that goes against gravity? Well, this tree grows up there, and it makes all these apples that are 10, 20 feet in the air. Then gravity comes into play and the apple falls down. That's what Newton looked at, the entropic forces of gravity. But what went against gravity? Life. So, to understand these principles. So I can't express enough about Victor Schauberger and his understanding of water, but I came up with this term called terraquaforming, which is the last chapter of the book, which is what the ancients knew. When you look all over the world, you see that the ancients were incorporating water into their environments in a very life-giving way. And that's basically what it's about, that incorporating water and earth in the most harmonious, life-giving way is this principle I call terraquaforming. And it's also just understanding the very primordial five elements, of which water and earth are two of them, but all of them are, how all of our universe and life comes into being are these archetypal elemental forces and beings that we can align with and work with. And that's how we will build this new earth and align with that. So
very
thanks. Yeah,
nice.
please check out the book. And like I said, you can see it for as a PDF or just order one. It's signed. I'll write it, sign your name, and someone get a anyone watching this get a copy from me. Why
Well,
not?
for
It came
one,
out in sorry, it came out in 20. I wrote it in 22, but it got printed in 2023, and I'm halfway through it. So this is 2026. So you got some time to order it before I sell out.
nice. I, for one, was not very aware of your work. So it's very serendipitous that I met you at that conference because when I saw your book, I'm like, oh, I got to get a copy of this. And now listening to you for this interview, I'm like, wow, I really got to get a copy of that because it's all right up my alley. And it's like you really done your homework. Decades and decades worth of homework. It's like a compilation of everything you've learned and discerned through, or learned through careful discernment throughout the
Yeah, I,
decades.
I I want my book to be the same thing that happened to me when I picked up Buckminster Fuller's Synergetics or walked into this gallery that had the drawings of the Palo Solari's arcologies. And I just got so inspired. I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense to me. And I just want to inspire other people, like wake them up and inspire them to see what is possible. And, because, you're not going to see that on, Netflix, I don't think, too soon.
No, 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 no. Well,
Although
you
there is some
definitely
interesting, I don't follow stuff like that, but I guess there is cool things on there.
very, very, very little. Very,
Yeah.
very, very little. Most of it's crap, as you probably imagined. It's all to
It,
distract us away from this kind of cool stuff.
well, of
The,
course, I didn't get into Stranger Things, which of course is about the Montauk experiments. I know people who love that. But several years ago, I watched when the second season of the OA, which stands for the Original Angel, came out. And so I watched all of those episodes, and that was actually a really good Netflix show.
oh,
So I'll
what
give
was it?
that
It's called OA?
the OA.
Okay, that sounds
Yeah, and
interesting.
it's
It's about the
interesting because
Montauk Project?
no, that's Stranger Things.
Stranger Things. Okay, I haven't
Yeah,
seen
that's
either of
got
them.
like 5 seasons, and it was a huge hit. The
Okay.
OA was popular. It was not a hit, but it was popular, and it was a good 5 years ago or so. I can't remember, but it's this woman, Britt Marling, who wrote, directed, and stars in it. And she actually has this movie called The Other Earth or something like that that's similar, but the OA, and it stands for Original Angel. And it's a mix of really profound, important stuff mixed in with a lot of sensationalized, weird goofy, weird stuff that makes for a TV show. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
of course they always
got to
have to
take the good.
Hollywoodize it, you know.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Take the good
Uh,
with the bad, make for an interesting, fun, show. But yeah, it's got some really powerful points, the OA.
nice. I'll check those out. I haven't seen either one of them.
Yeah, cool. Well, Stranger Things was a huge hit. I'm surprised you didn't know about that. And they weren't going to even call it Montauk at first. They thought better of that.
Well, I've heard of a lot of things, and I just assume they're going to be awful. So I need to hear somebody
Yeah,
recommend them before I actually check it out.
yeah.
So you're the first person who's recommended that one to me.
All right.
So
Well, that's really not up my alley. I'm more of a YouTube guy. There's so much
oh yeah,
stuff on YouTube.
YouTube and all that BitChute and all these other video stations are
Yeah,
where it's at. That's pretty much where I
yeah,
watch most of my
yeah.
entertainment these days.
Cool.
So,
Well,
well, we
well,
really
thank
are
you.
getting close to the memory being filled up here,
Yeah,
which I
this is great. Let's
apologize.
wrap it up. But thank you so much for having me on. Of course, I'll, promote this. Maybe I'll even get the copy and put it on my channel also, just to help get it out there. But
Nice.
I'm just looking forward to staying connected with you and all the good work that you're doing.
Yeah,
So
thank you
thank you
so
so much
much.
for
It was
having me.
very nice to meet you and very nice for you to do this interview. I thank you so much. And that was fascinating. I feel like we barely scratched the surface. So obviously, we could do like 10 hours of this and never really, and still, leave a lot of rocks unturned. But
Yeah,
you
yeah.
got to
But
cut it off somewhere, right?
oh yeah, no, I feel really good about it. We made some great points, and yeah, I'm looking forward to just more people. Hopefully, everyone watching this want to get in touch with me. I love connecting with people that want to, collaborate on this portal to the new earth that we're
Great.
all moving through right now.
All that info will be posted down below the video. And hey, maybe you can do another one with me sometime.
For sure, I'd love that. Okay, well,
Well,
until
thank you,
next time.
sir. Thanks for joining me. And thanks for joining another episode of High Vibe Tribe TV. We will see you next time. Bye.